Most football legends spend their entire careers trying to convince the world they were special. Zlatan Ibrahimovic walked into football acting like the world should apologize for taking so long to understand it. That is what made him different. This was not just a striker with technique, not just a giant with balance, not just a finisher with arrogance. Zlatan felt like a football experiment that should not have worked and somehow became terrifyingly real. A man built like a center back, moving like a street football genius, finishing like someone who took personal offense at the existence of goalkeepers. And the craziest part is that after a while, even that was not enough for him. Being unstoppable was not enough. Being unforgettable was not enough. Zlatan wanted something bigger than greatness. He wanted mythology. He wanted to turn himself into a football god. The reason this story matters is simple. There have been many great strikers. There have been killers, monsters, icons. But very few players ever created an aura like Zlatan. He was not just feared because he could score. He was feared because every match felt like he might attempt something insane simply because normal football had become too boring for him. That is why Zlatan was never just a player to watch. He was an event. And if you enjoy football stories about players who felt larger than the sport itself, stay with this channel, because this is exactly the kind of legend we love breaking down. To understand Zlatan properly, you have to begin with the contradiction. He was huge, but he was graceful. He was powerful, but he was creative. He could bully defenders physically, then humiliate them technically a few seconds later. Most elite strikers make you choose your fear. With Zlatan, you had no safe option. If you got too tight, he could spin away from you. If you gave him space, he could create something absurd from distance. If you tried to fight him physically, he was stronger than he looked.
If you tried to wait him out, he would decide the whole game with one touch. That is what made him feel unstoppable. Not that he scored every chance, not that he won every trophy, but that he made defenders feel like they were solving the wrong problem. You were not simply trying to stop a center forward. You were trying to stop a man who thought football existed to display his imagination. And Zlatan knew it. He did not hide his ego. He built his legend with it. Most players try to sound humble so the public will forgive their greatness. Zlatan did the opposite. He spoke like a man who had already seen the ending of the movie and knew he was the biggest character in it. Normally, that kind of arrogance becomes annoying unless the football can carry it. His football carried it, and that is why it became magnetic. Because every outrageous quote felt connected to something real.
This was the man who could score overhead kicks, backheels, impossible volleys, and goals that looked like they had been invented 5 seconds earlier. This was the man who could leave Serie A, dominate elsewhere, return, and still make entire leagues feel his presence. This was the man who carried himself like a king, because, in too many moments, the pitch actually treated him like one. And that is where the title begins to make sense. Zlatan was so unstoppable that eventually, normal superstardom no longer fit him. He did not want to be just another icon in football history. He wanted to stand above the noise, above the system, above ordinary praise. He turned himself into a symbol of force, ego, creativity, and defiance all at once. But this is what separates a real legend from a cartoon version of one. The myth only works if the football underneath it is brutal enough to sustain it. And Zlatan's football was brutal. He was not graceful in the soft, romantic way some great attackers were. Even when he did something beautiful, there was violence in it. His best goals felt like declarations. His movement felt insulting. His finishes often looked like they carried anger inside them, as if he was not just beating defenders, but punishing them for daring to think they belonged on the same field. That psychological damage matters. Great strikers score goals. Terrifying strikers change the way defenders behave before the game even starts. Zlatan did that. He put fear into the air. Center backs knew they were not just entering a tactical battle. They were stepping into a personal duel with someone who wanted to dominate them physically, technically, and emotionally. He did not just want your mistake. He wanted your humiliation. And once a player can do that consistently, he stops feeling like a normal opponent. He becomes an atmosphere. One of the biggest reasons Zlatan became a myth is that he never looked satisfied with ordinary excellence. Some forwards are happy to score a clean finish and move on. Zlatan often looked like he was chasing something grander. He wanted goals that people would replay for years. He wanted moments that made crowds stop reacting like football fans and start reacting like witnesses. That is why so many of his best moments live in memory like scenes, not statistics. The outrageous bicycle kick from distance, the acrobatic finishes, the impossible body control, the sense that the ball could arrive at him in an unnatural position and he would still somehow turn it into a threat. You could watch Zlatan and feel like physics was being negotiated in real time. But the mythology becomes even stronger when you remember that this was not a clean, easy rise. Zlatan's career was not built on one club, one shirt, one stable narrative. He moved through great sides, huge expectations, and different football cultures, and somehow, his identity never disappeared inside them. That is rare. Many stars become part of institutions. Zlatan made institutions feel like chapters in his own story. Ajax, Juventus, Inter, Barcelona, Milan, Paris, Manchester, then back again. Different systems, different ages, different teammates, different pressures. And still the same core feeling survived. If Zlatan was on the field, the game could become about him at any second. That level of self-presence is incredibly difficult to maintain. And maybe that is the real engine of the myth. Zlatan did not borrow aura from teams. He brought aura with him. He walked into dressing rooms, leagues, title races, and rivalries already convinced he belonged above them. For most players, that would collapse into parody. For Zlatan, it often became prophecy. Of course, every myth needs tension, and Zlatan's tension was simple. Could someone this theatrical, this proud, this self-created, really be as great as he claimed? Could a player who talked like a god actually survive the brutal reality check football gives everyone sooner or later? Incredibly, the answer was often yes. Not perfectly, not without flaws, not without contradictions. He was not the most complete player of all time, not the most decorated, not the most universally loved. But he was one of the rare footballers whose personality never felt separate from his playing style. The arrogance, the imagination, the violence, the elegance, the need to dominate, the need to be remembered, all of it showed up in the football itself. That is why Zlatan never feels small in memory. Even people who did not support his clubs remember the sensation of him. The feeling that something unusual might happen. The feeling that even a normal attack could suddenly become a stage for ego and genius.
The feeling that he was not trying to fit into football's hierarchy, but trying to stand above it and dare people to pull him back down. And there is one more reason this story hits so hard. Zlatan made self-belief feel like a weapon. So many players are confident. Zlatan weaponized confidence until it became part of his football identity. He could make opponents feel smaller simply by the way he occupied space, the way he demanded the ball, the way he reacted after scoring, the way he spoke before and after matches. He turned swagger into pressure. He turned personality into intimidation. That is not something you can fake for long. If the football is not elite, the act dies. But with Zlatan, the act kept breathing because the moments kept coming, the goals kept coming, the impossible kept happening just enough to keep the myth alive. And once the myth is alive, it changes how people see everything. A normal striker scores a spectacular goal and people praise the finish.
Zlatan scores a spectacular goal, and it feels like further evidence that he has been right about himself all along. That is an extraordinary place for any athlete to reach. At that point, every new moment stops being isolated. It starts feeding a larger story. The story was no longer just that Zlatan was great. The story was that Zlatan believed he was something beyond ordinary greatness, and football kept giving him moments that made that belief feel disturbingly reasonable. That is why the phrase, "he decided to become God," works so well for him. It is obviously exaggerated, theatrical, and provocative, which is exactly why it fits. Zlatan built one of the boldest self-mythologies modern football has ever seen. And unlike most people who speak on that level, he had the skill, force, and imagination to make the exaggeration feel almost earned. He did not ask football for permission to become a legend. He announced it. Then he spent years delivering enough violence, genius, and unforgettable moments to make the announcement stick. And maybe that is the cleanest way to understand Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He was not just a great striker with outrageous confidence. He was a player so unstoppable, so theatrical, and so unwilling to think of himself in normal human terms that he transformed his own career into mythology. He did not merely score goals, he created scenes, he created fear, he created memory. He created a version of himself too large for ordinary football language. That is why people still talk about him the way they do. Not just because he was brilliant, but because he made brilliance feel arrogant, dangerous, and unforgettable. So the real question is not whether Zlatan was one of the greatest strikers of his era. The real question is whether any other player has ever built such a terrifying mix of skill, ego, spectacle, and myth while making it feel this natural. Write your answer in the comments. Because Zlatan did not just want to be remembered, he wanted to be worshipped.